probably my favorite subject. Favorite subject today is talking about our PoE, our network streaming speakers that we have, that we developed here at Lenbrook. And I know, as I say, I can't say enough about it. And I guess what you can do is maybe if you want to learn something about it, because you're a little newer than me, and I'd love to share some of the information that I know about PoE speakers. So I'm sure you have some questions.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when I think of Blue Sound Professional, PoE speakers are what comes to mind. It's the future. It's one of the main things. For someone who's not familiar with it, how would you, explain it to them? We know PoE stands for Power over Ethernet, so you're getting your power and data. But how would you introduce it to them? Who's someone who's used to your low impedance or constant voltage system?
Yeah, so it's quite an alternative, really, where you have sort of an all-in-one solution. If you look at a PoE speaker, inside the speaker unit is a network streaming card, an amplifier, and the speaker drivers. So it's truly an all-in-one solution. And when it comes to a lot of installations, a lot of our end users are doing quick serve restaurants or places, and they want to get in and do an installation rather quickly and get out and go on to the next one. They might be doing a whole chain that has hundreds of outlets, and the old days of using an amplifier and speaker wire and making sure they got the plus and the minus and connecting up to the speaker took a lot of time, right, and figuring that all out. And so with the PoE speakers, you're just using an Ethernet cable and plugging it in. I mean, I have a couple here, and things like this is a wall mount speaker, and literally the only connection I have to make is my Ethernet connection here to the unit, and then I just connect it up to my PoE switch power supply, and boom, I'm done. And then this connects to my router, and there's my whole solution. Yeah. So you can realize it doesn't take very long to install it, and it's just kind of neat delivering, as you said, the power and the data to the unit, and that's all you have to do. So it's really simplified things, and yet gives you a lot of flexibility, because I know Blue Sound Professional, we have several different models. We have ones like these that are fairly small, and then we have larger units, the BSP 500 and 1000, that also are IP65 rated, so you can use them outdoors. So, like I mentioned in one of our other Surroundscapes, my little restaurant with my outdoor patio, that's a great place to use some of these PoE speakers that we have and connect them up. And because they're a streaming zone within the unit, I don't have to rely on a central controller to send data down to the unit. Each unit is capable of being connected up through to our app and to the internet to do its own stream. And so we really have a lot of success with that in being able to provide music to many different places. The fact that I can determine what zone, whether to group this with other zones or be its own zone, you can do that all from the app. So we're really excited. And I think a lot of our end users really need the opportunity to, come to our shows and hear these speakers. A lot of times in the past, I know when I was in the lighting world, there was concerns about the amount of power available to drive the units. And in the audio world, the same thing happened. But nowadays, with either PoE Plus or PoE Plus Plus delivering either 30 or 60 watts to a lot of our speakers, there's more than enough power and enough SPL that comes out of the unit to provide a pretty good solution. These units only need 30 watts. The same with the in-ceiling unit in front of you, Reza. That's a 30 watt PoE Plus unit, and has more than enough SPL that comes out of that, approaching 100 dB, and again, it's a real simple installation. We've seen really a huge growth in the in-ceiling solution over the last several months, and so we're really excited. Really, with these two examples, are kind of lead products for us. And as you said, really differentiates Blue Sound Professional.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned the different types of PoE Plus and Plus Plus, and the different wattages, because 30 and 60 watts, that's definitely a good amount of power. And because these drivers are so efficient, it sounds way, way more
Yeah,
than
we
that.
did a lot of work so that most of the units use 30 watts, and our larger units give you a choice. So if you only have a PoE plus switch, you could use that, and then if you have PoE plus plus, which is 60 watts, you could choose that too. Right in our app, you can make that decision.
Okay, so it's not something that's set in stone. Okay.
No.
Okay.
So the user, depending on their supply, and probably I should talk a little bit about, well, how do you get this PoE supply? So it's very common nowadays to have a network switch that has PoE supply capabilities to it. So they add a power supply to the unit, and out each port comes the required PoE power along with the data. So you can, from a solution from a PoE switch, is provide power to all the different speakers. The other way to do it, if you have only one or two speakers, let's say in a little tiny cafe, you can use another technique that's called a mid-span injector.
Okay.
And the injector is a pretty inexpensive, like a $30 unit, and it can provide 60 watts of output power and can easily power all our speakers. So you use one per speaker, and away you go. So if you want to keep the cost down, you only have a very low speaker count, you can use a mid-span injector solution, which basically you're connecting the switch to the injector and the injector to the speaker, and away you go. And the other way is using a switch when I have 6, 8, 10 speakers.
Okay.
Instead of having all these little injectors, I use a PoE switch, and then it's sort of a more compact solution, if you will.
Yes. And tell me a bit about, because I've seen this from doing support, about PoE budget and switches, because that might be something.
So that's a big thing. So a lot of times people will look at this and say, wow, look at all the PoE ports, right? And they go, it says it's a PoE plus plus switch, for example, 60 watts per port. This will work for my 8 speakers or whatever. Well, if you do the math, 8 times 60 is 480 watts. And then you find out that the unit here is only capable maximum of, let's say, 120 watts. Okay. What they do is they just say, well, we'll provide 120 watts, but you can only have so many speakers running at one time. So that's the overall budget that you have to be careful of. You need to match the overall budget along with the power available per port to your speakers. Okay. So we've had to educate some of our end users on that fact that, to match, maybe you need a 600 watt network switch when you're going up to those higher power outputs so that you can run, like 10 speakers at the same time.
Sure.
So you have to do a little bit of math. It's not hard, but you do need to do that little bit of math, or there's going to be a discrepancy on that budget.
Okay, so as long as they don't assume each port necessarily gives the full PoE spec.
I think some of the manufacturers would love you to think that, but they'll have these 24, 16 port PoE switches, but the budget just doesn't support that.
Yes. So so definitely PoE budget is what we're looking for when selecting a switch. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And when talking about power too, I would think a big cost savings from this solution is not having to run AC mains to each.
Yeah, that's a big thing. A lot of the installations to date from other manufacturers have been dependent on an AC receptacle on the wall to provide power to the powered speaker, right? And in a commercial installation, that can cost a few $100s per speaker just to do that. Commercial electrician is not going to be inexpensive. And so we eliminate all that with this solution. Plus the coordination. You go to do an installation, you got to coordinate, the installer guy coming with his ladder, and you got the electrician to worry about normally, and you got to coordinate that, and then someone can't make it, and it's tough when you're trying to do multiple installations in one day. So the beauty of this is an electrician's not required. So it's a low voltage situation. You're using an Ethernet run, and you can just do quickly. The installer can do that along with the speaker. You just need a couple screws for the bracket into the wall, and you're done.
Yeah.
And so, just that alone, the cost and the convenience of being able to do it without an electrician is a big plus for PoE speakers.
A lot of places may have that infrastructure already. Ethernet cable is so common. it's in buildings, it's everywhere.
Yeah,
You
yeah. I mean,
may,
you could have the Ethernet cable, and all you need to do is maybe switch out a normal network switch for a PoE enabled network switch, and that's it.
yeah, and we've had that, which we mentioned, where someone didn't realize that they had all the infrastructure there, all the cabling ran, and it just made it so easy and saved a lot of money because they were able to leverage ports they weren't even using previously. So
Great.
so tell me a bit more about, I guess, because this is an all-in-one, essentially a computer, if you more or less, a speaker and an amplifier. So each speaker is a standalone solution. So that means, scalability, and in terms of different applications, it's almost
Yeah, we
unlimited.
sort of talked about that, the flexibility
Yeah.
and the fact that each one's its own, because you'll find out there from other companies, they'll talk about these PoE IP speakers, but all they are is an endpoint that's dependent on a centralized solution to provide data. They'll have some data unit that's directing data down different Ethernet paths, and maybe in time sync, which is great, but it's all dependent on a central solution, which can cost a lot of money. Whereas our units, everything is built into the unit. So the network streaming card is inside the unit. A lot of people don't realize that,
Yes.
but it's a huge differentiator between this and some other companies who are promoting these IP PoE speakers out there.
Yeah.
And so that's a key differentiator of the unique thing about our PoE network streaming speakers.
Yeah, and I say generally, like, for lack of a better term, I say essentially partly a computer, in the sense that you can start the music on the BlueOS app and pretty much walk away. Everything's happening in that device.
Yeah, right. The unit works. Your UI device is all that your laptop,
That's
your
just a
iPhone
remote
is.
control.
It's kind of remote control. You can disconnect and walk away, and the unit will keep playing as long as there's power and there's internet. It'll keep playing. So yeah, it has a processor inside each unit and a full streaming card.
Yeah, and that was a question I had, actually. I had gotten from a client where they were thinking more along the lines of traditional Bluetooth and streaming, and thought that the heavy lifting was happening on the device or the phone. And I explained to them, no, that's doing all the work. Literally, your UI is just
Yeah.
for control.
I mean, the value in this device too, one thing that's kind of hidden in a way is, when you talk about a traditional streaming node that we would have in Bluesound or even Bluesound Professional, is basically inside the unit.
Yes.
So when you're paying for a unit like this, by default, you're getting the node inside the unit along with the amplifier for the speaker and the speaker drivers all in one. And so there's a lot of value to that, and what you're getting inside here. It's not just speaker drivers and an amp chip.
And what's amazing is looking at the footprint physically and the sound it puts out. You'll never believe the quality.
This BSP 200 is just phenomenal. I'm so impressed with that. We had it specially voiced, and it is just amazing for a small unit, and the same with the in-ceiling speaker here. If I can just grab it for a second here. It uses the same type of drivers as the in-wall unit here, but it has a more advanced, a newer version of our streaming card and amplifier, and it just sounds fantastic. I had when we first came out with this, I had a lot of people came up to me at shows and said, "Where's your 8-inch speaker?"
Yes,
and I said, "Well, if you check out our specs on this unit, you will find that its frequency range is equivalent to those guys across the aisle from us in their 8-inch speaker solution." I said, "You need to understand with the DSP capabilities within this unit, this sounds fantastic." And so when they listen to it, they agree. A lot of times in PoE speakers, you just got to listen to it.
100%.
People had a lot of the myth on PoE speakers was, they're not powerful enough. They don't sound very good. And these units have just totally dispelled that. And as a result, when people get a little taste of this, then they're absolutely sold on it. and it's been so good. You know, fascinating thing about this unit is the reason it came to be is I was at a show in Las Vegas, and a customer came up to me and said, you know, I like your on-wall speakers and all that, but you know, I really wish you had an in-ceiling solution. So I thought about it, and some other companies had some ideas of how to use our in-wall and in-ceiling configuration. I said, well, that's kind of crazy. I said, we just take all the guts out of that and put it inside here and turn it into an in-ceiling speaker, which is basically what we did.
Yes.
And we quickly turned around the ability to come up with this unit. And it's become one of our number one product. And really it's just from listening to customers. That was, as I say, input from a customer saying, I wish you had an in-ceiling speaker. And we thought about it and said, yeah, we should do that.
Yes.
And we did it. And, you know, you have to listen sometimes, right? To
100%,
customers, yeah. Maybe you should listen all the time. And they have some great ideas, and that's how we came up with that.
And it's, you know, like you mentioned, the coverage of that, you know, the 150-degree coverage is not.
It's really good.
Having
Having the tweeter there with the woofer, it gives us really great coverage, and that helps you on your design.
100%.
Your designs
100%.
we talked about, and it's just amazing. I mean, we end up selling these now 20, 30 at a time.
So, you know, talking about design, and we talk about PoE, and just, you know, the law of most electronics, there's limitations. Like, for example, even in a constant voltage, you know, after certain long runs. So, for example, we know, like, you know, network cables, there might be some limits to run. So if we're doing a design with a bigger venue, let's say, you know, an amusement park or something, what are some, you know, ways they can leverage this?
Sure, there's some ways to mitigate that. One thing we have to remember is Ethernet, you know, in the Cat5, Cat6 categories, like there's a limit in the Ethernet world to about 300 feet. If you need to go farther than that, then you can do that by using, like, for example, the mid-span injectors or whatever, and put that in at that distance, or go into another network switch. Okay. So, you know, in some respects, you know, you have to abide by that kind of rule. The Ethernet rule, can't get around that. The data side of things drops off. On the power side of things, we find there is a line loss over 200 feet, and that can be minimized by maybe using PoE++ when you don't typically need it, but you'd like it to bolster the power. So for example, this unit here only needs PoE+, 30 watts. But if you're doing a run over 200 feet, you can overcome that by using a PoE++, or an injector, for example, at 60 watts. And then when that line loss comes into play between 200 and 300 feet, then that can be mitigated by that extra power. And we don't put up a fuss. Mm-hmm. If you're putting a 60-watt supply on this unit. Some units from other manufacturers, you have to specifically connect the right power supply to the unit, but we can handle multiples.
So you can go higher then?
Yep.
For this. Okay. Perfect.
Yep. We have lots of plans to go further with that, but that's sort of our design criteria, and realizing that sometimes longer runs are really requested or needed.
Yes, for sure. And so really, you know, that even furthers the capability of them, because there are ways around, you know, distances, as opposed to when running, you know, traditional speaker wire or you know, a 70 or 100 volt system. There's still, you know, concerns of loss.
That's been done quite a bit in the lighting world. In PoE, they do the same thing, where they'll run to a certain floor and have a network switch in the plenum, and then provide PoE power locally to the lighting fixtures in that area, sort of like a hub and spoke kind of solution.
Okay.
You do the same thing on the audio side, where you can run your Ethernet cables or even a fiber cable to a local switch, and have that local PoE switch to provide power to the speakers in that way. So that there's ways to do that.
Yeah, and you know, it's pretty cool because all digital, so you're not worrying about, like, you know, signal loss or things like that you would when using analog components. You know, and or hums and buzzes being induced into the line. All that's pretty much gone now when using PoE.
Yeah, and we've worked now with PoE speakers now for several years, so we have a lot of experience. That in-ceiling speakers, really you could consider it our second generation PoE speaker. So we're now into subsequent generations of units and what we learned from our first generation equipment, and we're applying it. So we're certainly ahead of the curve or ahead of
Yeah.
our competitors in terms of PoE products, and so and we have plans to even take that even further.
Yeah, 100%. And like I can say, like I've only heard good things. When we see with our different designs and clients, people are usually blown away by the sound they get and whatever, like you mentioned, a lot of times, people are thinking, PoE, or they're thinking, they hear numbers like 30 watts or something. But when it's really a matter of hearing it and not just kind of looking at, specs on a page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly those aspects. And one other thing that's come up is just being able to monitor and control a speaker that's in a space. Using a traditional speaker, they're kind of dumb, right? Having an amplifier and a speaker, I mean, if the speaker has an issue, doesn't produce any sound or whatever, you have no idea. And until you're there and say, that speaker's not working too well. Neat thing about an active speaker and a PoE speaker, and one connected in our Blue Sound Professional world, is we now have cloud control tools where we can actually know if this speaker goes offline. You can be told anywhere in the world. You could be monitoring and see that unit has gone offline. So that intelligence can get passed back down through the cloud into your device and warn you that you've got an issue. So that's a whole new aspect that our PoE active speakers now can provide that kind of information. So not only can I monitor and control the device, but I get all that feedback. I get all that feedback information. I can see what it's streaming, et cetera, all the way through to knowing that I'm producing sound out here. Oh, it's offline. I know I'm not. I can deal with that. If I had a speaker and an amplifier, I'd have no idea.
And that's down to the speaker level.
Down to the speaker level, I can see every speaker that's online from anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So we do that for a Blue Sound professional control, cloud control that we have, and we offer that as an optional item that you can have. So putting that all together, you end up with a really neat solution. Because I have a lot of integrators who they've got a casino and, they hate to get a call from the casino manager if the music stopped or whatever. They can get all that information out themselves and correct the issue right from their own car. They can look on their phone and say, oh, music, they'll get an email saying the music stopped, and they can start it again or do whatever. And that kind of capability is just not available in any other audio system.
And, as you were mentioning it, it got me think also, like, it has its own sort of built-in redundancy in the sense that each speaker is a standalone active device. So if one speaker, something does happen, the other ones are still playing, as opposed to, if you had...
like in a space like this, if I had 4 or 6 speakers running, if one happened to fail, I still got the others running and playing the same music.
Yeah, it's not like having, a 70-volt amp feeding, 50 speakers on that amp.
That's where we get back into centralized versus decentralized solutions. What's the value of one versus the other? And a lot of that is in the decentralized solution. I have lots of backups in that same space, whereas a centralized solution, when that main closet goes down, that's it.
Yes, 100%. So, yeah, I mean, the advantages are pretty endless, and I think one of my favorites, and we did tap on this a bit, is the scalability to scale up or scale down. You're not tied down to a specific wattage amplifier, for example, and if you wanted to add, you had to add, increase more.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point too. I mean, and you can imagine a small cafe who traditionally had this amplifier in a closet with going out to these speakers, and that takes up room. There's no closet required now. You just go this and literally have your network switch that you already have on a shelf somewhere along with the router, and that's all you need from a main control standpoint. And then the speakers are totally distributed in this little cafe. Because when you're a small cafe, you don't have room for a whole lot of audio equipment to run your system. So, you'll see a lot of that where someone has this big amplifier and it just takes up a lot of room.
Yeah, power and everything. And yeah, no, definitely. One of the other things you were mentioning, having it hardwired is
Yeah,
definitely
you're right. You're right. I almost
insane.
forgot that. The fact that, okay, we have this single connection here, and it's a robust connection. It's not Wi-Fi, but it's also so that robust connection make sure I don't have a lot of audio dropouts.
Yes.
So I'm getting power and data. I'm not getting Wi-Fi dropouts. So I end up with a great connection, and I'm saving the cost of the AC mains connection.
Exactly.
These wireless speakers that someone ends up plugging a cable into a receptacle. That wire going into that AC receptacle, it's kind of funny. They call it a wireless speaker. It's not really a wireless speaker. I'm plugging into the AC outlet.
Yeah.
So, I'd prefer to stay away from this wireless speaker and all the pitfalls and lack of robustness, if I can use that term. And instead, go to this kind of solution where I have a robust connection, no audio dropouts, and then I'm delivering the power and data in one easy cable. So, and anyone can easily connect this. It's a standard cable. There's nothing special about this Ethernet cable. It's it's just a Cat6 cable, and away you go. And so we're not making any demands on using different cable. So
Makes sense.
it's all readily available and easy to use.
I like how you mentioned that about the Wi-Fi, because it's funny. I was laughing because I had a conversation about that recently where, they mentioned Wi-Fi. They're like, oh, wireless. But then I said, well, how are you going to power it? And they're like, oh yeah, they didn't realize it needs to plug in. So that's something that people don't realize, that, it's not necessarily, wireless, so to speak. And, for a commercial solution, yeah, Wi-Fi is not really going to cut it. You want that hardwired, you want reliability. And yeah, definitely 100%,
I mean, as I say, I think I mentioned before, but that was really one of our main design criteria when we came up with Blue Sound Professional, was to have this kind of solution. Was very important to us, and why we stuck to Ethernet. So even our zone players and streaming amplifiers are all Ethernet based only, because we just see the robustness has really paid off. And when you look at any support requests we've had over the last several years, we just it's really minimized because of that. And so the PoE is just a natural progression on that, and it's been great for us.
Awesome. Yeah, no, definitely is the future of the industry. And what seeing is believing, hearing is believing in this case.
I didn't know if you had any more points for me, Reza, or whether I can...
No, I think you covered them all. I'm sold.
Are you? That's good. I'll send you someone. Maybe once we're done with this presentation, we'll get into the wings again.
For sure.
So thanks, Reza. I think we've gone through some PoE hot tech tips today, and hopefully everyone's been able to learn something about PoE. We've had a lot of experience now with this technology and multi-generations of systems, and so hopefully now everyone will be a little more aware and be willing to work with us on PoE systems, which we're very excited about. So thanks for watching this episode of Surroundscapes.